Welcome to our deep dive into the Schengen transit trap. Today we will explain how some connecting itineraries through the Schengen area can unexpectedly require a full immigration entry instead of simple airside transit. Why this matters for visas. How residence permits can change the rules, and how to plan safely. We will also add a clear disclaimer and include quizzes to test understanding. Let's get started. First, we will define airside transit and contrast it with full entry. Next, we will unpack the domestic connector loophole using a real-world style example. Then, we will clarify when a national residence permit can exempt you from needing a Schengen entry visa. After that, we will explain airline boarding decisions and their legal basis. Subsequently, we will give you step-by-step checks to validate your itinerary. Finally, we will review key takeaways and test your understanding with short quizzes. Before we proceed, a clear disclaimer is necessary. This video provides general information and is not legal advice. Immigration rules change and are enforced by national authorities. Always confirm the latest requirements on the official website of the country, where you will first enter the Schengen area and verify with your airline. When in doubt, contact the Embassy or Border Police Information Service of your first point of entry. To begin, we need to distinguish airside transit from full entry. True airside transit means you never pass through passport control, and you remain entirely within the international transit area until boarding your next international flight. By contrast, full entry happens when you must cross passport control at your first Schengen airport. If your onward flight is to another city within the Schengen area, you will be required to clear immigration at your first point of entry. That action constitutes formal entry. In short, transit is not the same as entry. Once you cross passport control, you have entered the Schengen zone. This sequence diagram illustrates the chain of events. The traveler checks in, and the airline must verify whether the traveler is eligible for the most restrictive segment of the itinerary. Upon arrival at the first Schengen airport, the traveler must clear passport control if the onward flight is to another Schengen destination. Border police will check the traveler's visa or residence permit. If the documents authorize entry, the traveler proceeds to the domestic gate. If not, entry is refused, and the airline can be liable, which is why airlines deny boarding up front if requirements are not met. Consider this example. A traveler flies from India to Frankfurt, and then Frankfurt to Munich. Frankfurt is the first Schengen point of entry. Because Munich is also within the Schengen area, the traveler must pass through passport control at Frankfurt to reach the domestic gate. This is a full entry into Schengen. Therefore, an airport transit visa alone would not suffice. The traveler needs legal authorization to enter the Schengen area to make this domestic connection. On the left, airside transit occurs entirely within the international zone, without crossing passport control. This can be possible with an airport transit visa or visa-free transit depending on nationality and airport rules, and it typically involves an international-to-international connection. On the right, Schengen entry requires crossing passport control and is a full legal entry. This generally requires a Schengen visa or a qualifying residence permit. It is often triggered when the onward flight is to another Schengen destination, converting what a traveler assumed was transit into actual entry. For many travelers who otherwise need a Schengen visa, a valid national residence permit from an EU or Schengen member state can serve as an exemption for short stays or transit. This includes, for instance, certain Irish residence permissions like Stamp 4. The residence permit must be valid and national in scope, rather than a limited local document. Always carry the physical residence card and verify on the official immigration website of your first Schengen entry country that your specific permit qualifies for visa exemption for your planned transit or short stay. This table summarizes typical document requirements by itinerary type. If you connect from a non-Schengen country to a Schengen airport and then fly to another Schengen destination, you must enter at the first Schengen airport, requiring a Schengen visa or an exempting residence permit. If you connect non-Schengen to Schengen and then out to non-Schengen but can remain airside, you may only need an airport transit visa or possibly no visa depending on nationality and airport rules. However, if any part of your connection requires crossing passport control, you will need legal entry authorization. Finally, a purely non-Schengen itinerary follows destination rules only. Next, follow this pre-flight legality checklist. First, map your route and identify the first Schengen point of entry. Second, classify the connection and determine whether your next leg is domestic within the Schengen area. Third, Decide whether you must cross passport control at that first Schengen stop. Fourth, match your documents accordingly, distinguishing between a Schengen visa and a valid national residence permit that may offer an exemption. Fifth, verify exemptions on the official website of the country of entry. Sixth, confirm requirements with your airline and carry printed rules or screenshots as backup. Finally, allow buffer time and avoid tight connections when immigration processing is necessary. This flowchart presents a decision tree. Starting from your itinerary, if the next flight is to another Schengen city, you must clear passport control and therefore need a Schengen visa or a qualifying residence permit. If the next flight is to a non-Schengen destination and the airport allows you to remain airside, you do not cross passport control, and you may only need an airport transit visa depending on your nationality. A separate branch accounts for scenarios like terminal changes or overnight layovers that force you to leave the transit area. In those cases, you must treat the situation as an entry with visa or residence permit requirements. Now consider how airlines operate. They apply the most restrictive segment of your journey when verifying documents. If you cannot legally enter the Schengen area to complete a domestic connection, the airline is obligated to deny you boarding. Carriers face fines and liability if they transport passengers who lack proper documentation. Always carry printed or offline copies of official immigration rules that support your eligibility to enter or transit, especially when relying on a residence permit exemption. Meanwhile, these are frequent pitfalls and their remedies. Many travelers assume all connections are airside, but if the next leg is within Schengen, you will likely need to enter. Do not rely solely on airline or gate agent advice. Cross-check with official immigration sources. If your route has a domestic Schengen connector, an airport transit visa will not suffice. You will need a Schengen visa unless you hold a qualifying national residence permit. Also, terminal changes or overnight connections that force you out of the transit area should be treated as entry, requiring proper authorization. Quiz time. Question. You fly Delhi to Frankfurt to Munich on one ticket. You hold only an airport transit visa. Can you complete this journey? Options. A. Yes, because you are just transiting. B. No, because you must enter Schengen at Frankfurt for the domestic connection. C. Yes, if you do not collect your baggage. D. Yes, if your layover is under 2 hours. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is B. The domestic connection from Frankfurt to Munich requires you to enter the Schengen area at Frankfurt, and an airport transit visa is not sufficient for entry. Second quiz. Question. You fly Cairo to Paris to New York. Your connection in Paris stays airside, and you can remain in the international transit area. What documents are typically needed? Options. A. A Schengen C visa because you touch Paris. B. Only documents required for the United States plus any required airport transit visa depending on nationality and airport. C. A residence permit from any EU country. D. No documents at all. You may pause the video now to think about the answer. We will discuss the answer in the next section of the video. The correct answer is B. Because you remain in the international transit area and do not enter the Schengen area, a Schengen C visa is typically not required. You still need documents for your final destination, such as a U.S. visa if applicable, and you may need an airport transit visa depending on your nationality and airport rules. This mind map highlights the stakeholders and rule sets. The traveler brings the passport, visas, and residence permits. The airline performs document checks and faces liability for transporting passengers without proper documents, which can lead to denial of boarding. Border police make the final entry decision and verify any visa exemptions. The itinerary itself determines the first point of entry, whether there is a domestic connector, and whether true airside transit is possible. Official sources, such as national immigration websites and embassy guidance, provide authoritative rules. To recap, domestic Schengen connections require entry at the first Schengen airport. An airport transit visa does not allow entry and is inadequate for such itineraries. A valid national residence permit from an EU or Schengen member state can exempt you from needing a Schengen entry visa for short stays or transit, provided it is valid and recognized. Airlines evaluate the most restrictive segment and can deny boarding if you lack proper documentation. Always confirm the current rules with official sources from the country of entry. Finally, Thank you for watching. If this video helped you avoid the Schengen transit trap, please like the video, share it with your travel buddies, and subscribe for more smart travel breakdowns. Drop your itinerary questions or experiences in the comments so we can learn together. Safe travels, and see you in the next one.